So welcome to this session at the Copenhagen DOX Film Festival, where we're going to talk about women in investigative journalism. My name is Maria Andersen, and I will do my best the next 30 minutes in great company with these three very cool ladies and filmmakers. I have been working as an investigative journalist myself, and to be honest, I would prefer to talk about the craft of investigative journalism and go through every little detail in these three films. But after 16 years in this business, I realized that if we don't talk about the lack of women in investigative journalism, we won't be able to change it. Because the fact is, there is an uneven representation, not only when it comes to women, but also when it comes to race, when it comes to social class, in the field of investigative journalism. So, therefore, I am thrilled to be able to welcome these three filmmakers. We have Sonia Kennebeck on a line from the state of New York. Welcome, Sonia. It's good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
You are an independent filmmaker and the director of the Emmy-nominated documentary National Bird from 2016. It is about the US drone program. And you have two films out right now. One is The Enemies of the State, and the other one is called United States versus Reality Winner. They're both about the whistleblowers, and they're both shown here at the festival. And the last one is nominated for the main prize at the festival, the DOX Award. We talked together yesterday. We had a bit of a hard time getting in touch with each other, and I asked you if you had been busy the last couple of days, and you replied to me, "No, I have been busy the last couple of years." So in short term, Sonia, can you tell me a bit about your life the last couple of years work-wise?
Yeah, so I decided after a career in broadcast investigative journalism to become an independent filmmaker, which means that I'm independently producing and directing documentaries. But in fact, I'm actually doing investigative documentaries, which just means I spend a lot of time doing extensive research on my stories and, digging really deep and working for years on one subject and going, really deep into the subject matter. So it has been, extremely, difficult and challenging to, fundraise for the films, but also do the investigations. I have an amazing team of collaborators, so I couldn't do it without him. But yes, doing investigative journalism independently is a big challenge. I'm not going to hide it.
We are very happy that you are with us today, so a warm welcome to you. Next to me, I have these two young, very talented young women, Stine Uldbjerg and Anna Thyrri. Both of them debutants at this year's festival. Well, with the film "Too Fast to Be True." It's a film about an insider's doping revelations in the top of the running world. I know you also have had some crazy busy days.
Yes, definitely. Yes,
we're glad to have you here. You're still in the editing room right now, and
yes,
very soon
trying to finalize it. But yeah,
a warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
10 years ago, I got a job as a host for an investigative journalistic TV program at the Danish Broadcasting Corporation. And I remember the headline of the first news article for the interview I gave. And it was a double-page interview, and the headline was, "I'm not as sweet as I look." I remember being puzzled by their choice of words. Some would maybe take it as a compliment. For me, it was rather condescending. but when I look back today, I think it frames rather precisely one of the reasons why we don't have that many women in investigative journalism. And that's what we're going to talk about today. The problem is, I can say on behalf of myself, that we have a very fixed image of what an investigative journalist is. So, Sonia, did you experience the same thing when you started in this field 17 years ago?
Yes, absolutely. And I loved your intro to this whole session where you said, it would be great if we could talk about the films and our craft and our investigations and our research. But in fact, we are often pushed into talking about something else. And when I released my investigation into the US drone war for, an investigative feature documentary film that featured 3 drone program whistleblowers who I found myself, who I researched, I found these original sources. And then I had traveled to Afghanistan to interview survivors of, airstrikes. I presented my film at the Berlin Film Festival, and I was interviewed by a radio journalist. And the first question that I received and sort of a commentary was about my hair and my outfit, and like in very sort of like vivid description, my silk blouse and and the way I'd styled my hair and my makeup. And you could say that, oh, like, what's the problem with that? But for me, the thing that was striking me is that it was cutting into my time to speak about the subject matter. So the first question that I had to respond to was my appearance and my outfit. And I had just, only a few months before that, I had been to Afghanistan. I had been, filming and traveling in a war zone. And I had really dug up a lot of, important and crucial information that I really wanted to talk about, and, the results of my research. And that is the reason I think panels like this are so important, because we, as much as we women journalists want to talk about our research and our crafts and our investigations, we are often pushed into a corner where something else, is becoming sort of the story. And that's why, I was like, immediately when you contacted me, I was completely on board in raising, awareness for, the issues and why we need more women and more diversity, more, people with disabilities, people with like different, gender identities. Like, we just need a lot more diversity in investigative journalism because of the stories that we can tell that other people might overlook.
So, Anna and Stine, this is your first investigative documentary. What led you into this field?
Yes, it was kind of a coincidence, you can say, not into the field, but into this story. It was kind of a coincidence. We were traveling. We had both been thinking about that we wanted to do investigative story, and I was.
I've worked in the news, like just with news before, but I always thought that it was very interesting. But it's also like you don't just become an investigative journalist, you also need to have the story and to know your way into it, I think. So I've always thought it was interesting, but it just never came along the story. And then we found this story, and it was very natural for me to go into this field.
But I think also my background is that I kind of grew up in a family where it's quite normal.
Your mom and dad?
My mom, yes. Yeah. So, for me, I have kind of I have a person in my life who is actually doing investigative journalism, and she's a woman. So, for me, it wasn't that big of a step like it could be for others, maybe. I don't know, because I only have my own experience into this, but that might be a reason why it felt more easy to take this step into it, even when it's still, when we go to meetings with broadcasters, when we go to, we still get this surprised look every time, like, what is it you doing this kind of a story?
And not only maybe they're surprised that it's young women, but also the subject of your film
Exactly.
is the running, the world of running and the doping industry.
Exactly.
What has the reactions been to that?
I think people have just generally just been surprised, because normally when you see sports investigative journalism, they imagine it's a man, and maybe an older man than we are, and also because it's not like we have worked with sports before. It's the first time, so it's not really about the sport. It's just about the story and what we think is an important story that needs to be told, because there is cheating and fraud.
But maybe that's also why when we talk to broadcasters, when we talk to people who have seen this film we have made, almost everybody reacts like, wow, this is a new kind of sports documentary, because actually it's not just about sports. It's more than that. And they are quite surprised that a sports documentary or a documentary about the issue of sport can look like this, because it's also a very personal story, and it's a story about a friendship. It's a story that definitely have like one main character that we really follow all the way, and we have his ups and downs, and
So Sonia, when you listen to these young women telling about people being surprised that you can do a sports documentary, an investigative documentary this way, what do you think are the consequences of the lack in general of women in investigative journalism?
I think we're simply missing out on stories. The beginning of an investigative project is an idea, and an idea of what you want to investigate further. A real investigative story, I believe, is based on original research and on your own sources. And so, that's not copying existing information. And the stories that you tackle are often stories that you are yourself interested in and that you have access to. And by not having sort of, more women in investigative journalism and just, more diversity of ethnicities and nationalities as well, I think we all in our societies are missing out on important stories. So I make the claim that if we have different types of people with different types of experiences telling an investigating stories, we are actually increasing the quality of reporting and the range of reporting. And that's why if we talk about quality, that's what we are going to get. We are really losing out on certain type of stories and experiences if it's only always the same type of journalists investigating.
Critics would say that the only thing that matters is quality. And if we start choosing films and journalists on the base of gender, it will risk the level of quality. What is your response to that?
Well, if it risks the level of quality, I mean, that's a claim that, women, for example, are doing lesser quality journalism, and I would say quite the opposite. In my experience, I have a lot of peers and investigative women journalists and documentary filmmakers who have done extraordinary investigative journalism, and I would really say that our input, our research really widens the scope of stories, of sources that we have access to. We can go undercover in different locations, and then overall, when people make sort of the quality argument, my question back to them is, what is the criteria for quality and who is making the judgment? Because quality also has a very subjective element, in people, and who are making decisions with, journalism awards, critics, people who are writing on the media pages, and who are these people and what are the stories that they are interested in. And I do believe that we need more storytellers and more storytellers, diversity overall, because I think, the judgment currently might also be, a little bit limited of what is, a qualitative, like high value story, who is making these judgments. But yeah, my argument I've seen over and over again, excellent, outstanding, really important historic investigative journalism being, done by women journalists.
But what is it that you think we're missing out on when we don't have as many women as men, for example, in investigative journalism?
I think it's, we're missing out on multiple levels. One is the stories that we can identify. I do think what, you look toward as, an investigative journalist, it's based on your own experiences. I, for example, I grew up in a working class family, and I do, I do identify, I think, different types of stories that some people who have not had, experiences, of struggle, growing up, for example, are seeing as a valuable story. Then we have the sources themselves. In my drone warfare documentary, I profiled, I followed stories of 3 whistleblowers, and 2 of them are women. And with one of those women, I was actually, going on a tour where we screened a film, and we've spoken to academics and researchers and other journalists who have been doing work on drones. And I've sat next to her when, male academics or journalists were entirely disregarding her as a source. And I know from own experience what a valuable source my subject is, and how much more information she can provide to people. And I've seen firsthand how they, were disregarding her experience. And it seemed to me it was because she wasn't fitting sort of the profile and the idea they had of someone who was working with military drones. And that's where we're really missing out on identifying certain sources and stories as well.
So, Anna and Stine, it can be hard to put words on when this is your first film, but have you experienced any advantages or the opposite disadvantages by being young women working in this field?
Definitely both, I think.
Okay.
But advantages, I think there is plenty, and I think, like Sonia is also saying, you can, of course, you can enter places in a different way than a male investigative journalist would be able to do. Yes, we have been we've been into, like, we have almost adapted into this family, and of course that would also be possible as a male, but I think still the approach we had in the beginning, like just living there, like just being a part of, but I don't
and
know.
I think they were even like also a little bit surprised that we were so interested in it, and we had time and we just talked, and it's like we created that close bond. But I think, of course a male can do it also, but maybe it was a good thing there.
But I think also, sometimes we also have happen to go under the radar, so that because people don't expect people who looks like us to do this kind of story, so they get we can access some places where the typical male investigative journalist would maybe not be able to go, or maybe he would be more easily detected in this. Yeah, so I think
maybe we're
dangerous,
not maybe you're not so intimidating for them like a male could be.
No.
Yeah. So what about disadvantages?
I think that's more like when we go to meetings, that's more in the next process for me. I see it as when and people have done this in a very good with good intentions, but sometimes people even ask us to maybe lower down our more female sides, because when you go into a meeting with broadcasters or something, they expect a different kind of journalist entering the meeting. So
what have your response been to that?
We didn't do that.
No, we just
but
we just just do like we normally do, because as we have seen, it has worked to just do what we feel is the best thing to do, and then we just stick to that.
Yes, but that's also we are making this behind the scenes kind of a TV program, which is shown on TV2, and it's when I first saw it. I was also looking at myself and at Stine, and not to say anything bad or something, but we all have this really. It's so much, I don't know, structure that we have this image of who can be an investigative journalist doing this kind of a dangerous job, entering these places, handling crazy situations.
So what was your reaction when you saw yourself on this?
I was like, we don't look like investigative journalists, but of course we are, and we are doing this story now, and I'm so proud that we just do it our own way. So
I was very proud to see that we actually, even though we do things probably the wrong way that you should, but I've been very proud to see that we just do it our own way.
And I think just that you say that we should, it's just telling so much, because
there's no right and wrong.
So Sonia, do we need to redefine what an investigative journalist is?
I mean, look at us here. We're all investigative journalists. So I think we are defining it for ourselves. But it's what you were just describing, all of your experiences, they sound so similar to sort of, what I've experienced in my own work. I think, for me, I've always felt it has been, an advantage, on the job and shoots, in high risk environments, the presence of a woman can actually be de-escalating. I love doing interviews that are really challenging the interview partner, almost confrontational with politicians or, government or military officials. And I have often, felt that I could ask, more questions and more, tougher questions in a way, because of, as a woman often talking, to what in many instances has been, a man in an interview situation, they would, sometimes, if there was another guy, they might have walked away. And then in the case, of me asking the questions, I would actually get answers to a lot of questions. I could do, really tough, challenging interviews. And it has been such an advantage. I really think I've been able to extract a lot of information. But, as you said before, on the side, the business side, when you're, dealing sort of in a broadcast environment and so on, you do, sometimes have to fight for the sort of the respect and the acknowledgement of your work, and kind of get past, certain expectations or prejudices as well. So, yeah.
So now we are sitting here talking about this. Sonia, if you should point out one thing we could do to make this change go a bit faster, what should that be?
Well, I'm not sure how fast it can go, because I think, to have true equality and change is to have diversity at all levels, within the critics who are writing, film reviews, the media journalists, the broadcast executives, the gatekeepers, we really have have a range of people and experiences who are also the decision makers. With the awards are important in investigative journalism, but kind of you look at traditionally who has been making decisions of what is considered quality. So that's kind of the longer term solution, I think. In terms of like making that change, I think discussions like this are very important, because we have to have an awareness in order to create change. And I think discussions like this are the first step.
What do you think, Anna and Stine, about if we should point out a thing that could make more women go into investigative journalism?
I think it's really important to have more women and more like role models, because for me, I didn't really think about it before. I was questioned about it, but actually when I think about it, there wasn't really so many women to look up to, because it wasn't so, I couldn't see it so much. So I think that's really important, that we have more women who can show that you can be an investigative journalist just the way they are, or just the way you are yourself, but it doesn't matter if you are a man or woman.
And I know actually the company you work at, that's one of the few places where there are more women or more female than male journalists. What are the thoughts about that?
I think it's for me, it's very inspirational, and I think they've also thought about it, because it is just very important, because we see different stories, and it's very healthy for a team to have the diversity and to have the different sexes, and I think it's really good for the development of new stories. And
and when that's said, it should also be said that the main part of the people who are investigative journalists in this company are still male. So it's I know it's something that they have there in their minds, but it's also hard, because maybe there is not so many women who actually choose to go in this way, or apparently there isn't. So yeah.
But it's really good to talk about, because that makes it made me aware of the problem when I was asked about it. Yeah.
And now you are role models, the two of you. So if there are young female journalists out there, there's considering or have some doubts about going into the investigative journalism, what would your advice be to them?
Maybe just don't try to be a male journalist. Try to just do it the way that because you have some advantages as a young woman. You definitely have, and we have experienced that. So
just find a story that interests you and you want to dig deeper in, and then do it your own way, and it will be good.
And I think really also the point that Sonia's making about the diversity, that I think this should really be in everybody's mind, that it's needed to see a lot of people's point of view, and we have to create this diversity, and the only way we can do this is to go into it, just try to do it.
Yeah. Also because even though we all female, we still think differently. So it's not like female are the same and male are the same, but we all think, we see stories different.
Yeah, and of course the point of view, which stories you choose, and you don't have to choose this story because that's the real kind of investigative story. You can look everywhere.
Yeah.
And what about you, Sonia? I know that you also have a wish for the bosses and leaders around in the production companies. What would you say to them?
Well, I really want them to, consciously support, diverse investigative journalists and storytellers, because I do think we're losing out otherwise. And I'm sure that there are many, young women out there who want to become investigative journalists and who are running against closed doors. I can just say for myself, I've always wanted to be an investigative journalist. As long as I can remember, I wanted to do, really, national security and security policy journalism. And it was, I was often sort of like pushed into the corner of like the softer stories. And I said time and time again, that's not my interest. I want to do these like hard, high risk investigative stories. And I think there are other people, like me out there, and I've been trying to mentor. I think that's one of the advice that I would give, to whoever's listening out there, try to find, as you said, role models before mentors, because it can be very helpful, and like, having someone who has your back and who can give you advice.
I will let that be the final word. Thank you so much, the three of you, Sonia Kennebeck and Stine Uldbjerg Hansen and Anna Thyrri. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.